Do I go for a long, protracted legal battle, or do I make sure that we remain focused as a city and deliver the services?
There's no problem with criticizing journalists. Actually, we welcome criticism. What we are against is the manner in which Julius Malema was doing it and the language that he was using outside of the Zondo Commission.
Could Eskom's dire state be the final straw for a Moodys downgrade? The ratings agency is often considered lenient and is the only one keeping South Africa's sovereign debt at investment grade. But now it's raising red flags over Eskom's unsustainable capital structure, the power utility's 440 billion rand debt, and government's continued support for the parastatal.
These are red lights flashing that Moodys will indeed is considering downgrading us to junk status to join the other two. What is unclear is whether they would do it in one shot or whether they would first put us on a negative outlook.
So what happens if Moodys downgrades the country? Some international investors holding South African bonds will be compelled to abandon them because of rules around a particular bond index. That means the rand would weaken sharply, inflation would surge, and the Reserve Bank governor warns borrowing costs would escalate.
A decline in our credit rating means that the cost of government's borrowing is going to go up. And if the cost of government's borrowing goes up, then the cost of borrowing goes up for every borrower in the South African economy.
What Eskom and other state-owned enterprises now need is a credible, convincing strategy to break them out of their perpetual state of dependence on government. But the economic growth question is by far the most urgent. It can be answered by creating a substantial shift in the country's education outcomes, relaxing visa laws, and creating an environment with policy certainty for investors. Devin Murrigan, Johannesburg.
Low economic growth and stiff competition from branchless digital banks are forcing traditional institutions to restructure. Many banks have already reduced their floor space and are streamlining operations. South Africa's biggest financial union, SASPO, says 10,000 workers are at risk and have threatened a walkout by their 73,000 members.
That is why we are now up in arms, because we believe as SASPO that the banks knew 4 or 5 years ago that this was coming.
Standard Bank, which is in the process of shutting down 91 branches, has since released a statement refuting that it will retrench 6,000 employees. The bank says it's making strides to ensure that impacted employees are absorbed into other roles. Nedbank, which released flat interim results today, says it's been consulting with unions for months and fewer employees will be affected.
1,400 of those staff will be able to be accommodated in the new business area. So that leaves us with a challenge of between 50 and 100 people whom we would have to find placement for. That's the conversation that is taking place, making sure that we appropriately skill them for the new requirements, for the new roles, and find placement for them. Clearly, this notion that Nedbank is retrenching 1,500 people is, in our view, entirely not true.
This is unfolding at a time where job cuts in the country are particularly sensitive as the unemployment rate has risen to an alarming 29%, its highest in over a decade. Aviwe Mtila, Johannesburg.
6 years ago, Tumi Pake had an idea to start his own business. He applied for government funding.
In my case, it was through CIFA, government funding. And at the time, they were looking for startups. But I think at the point, they were more investing in the entrepreneur than the business, because obviously it's a brand new business.
This funding laid the foundation for him to expand.
5 years later, we've been able to employ close to 100 people We have 15 health clubs in South Africa, and we're actually a very scalable and a growing business. What it did was, other investors who were willing to invest in my business, I was investor ready because it allowed me to access more debt funding.
Parke is one of the lucky ones. The Trade and Industry Department says up to 70% of SMMEs fail within 2 years. Experts say certain criteria must be met for businesses to access funding, especially government funding. This includes viable business models, keeping up-to-date financial records, managing their cash flow, articulating their funding needs, and preparing a business plan that positions their funding needs. With a dismal unemployment rate of over 29%, it's clear a new approach is needed to create jobs in the country.
Let's concentrate on the existing businesses, which have already survived and have got better potential of scaling up, growing, as well as creating employment.
Government has recently announced its financial support for SMMEs will be increased from 2 to 5 years. Hopefully, this means fewer small businesses will have to break up a sweat to access the help they need. John Bailey, Pretoria.
One who attacks our South African police, irrespective of whether they are South African or they are foreign national, they are undermining, they are attacking the state, and an attack on the state is classified as terrorism, and it cannot be allowed, and we will not allow it.
The Small Business Development Minister is warning that any attack directed at the state won't be tolerated. It follows these disturbing scenes in central Johannesburg last week. A showdown between vendors and police, which saw officers having to retreat. The department is now trying to find out exactly what happened.
Brand owners are saying they are losing 350 million rands. They have lost 350 million rands between December and July this year. And that is not even a year. 350 million rands is a lot of money for any economy. And that 350 million rand that is in the black market economy is not benefiting the country and any other citizen of this country and a resident in this country.
Johannesburg's hustle and bustle hasn't stopped, and shops are bursting at the seams. Traders are insisting they're not selling counterfeit clothes.
We are not a criminal. We don't do any criminal. We are selling in the street. We are doing anything here for living. We are not druggists. We are not rapists. We are not grabbing bags from the people. We are hustling. We are working.
All of us are foreigners. They don't know one to support us. There is no family here. No father, no mother, nothing to do. You see, I survive my life. It's even every day. Today's I didn't eat also.
Most of these shops are run by foreign nationals. They are pleading with government for protection as they fear for their lives. Kyle Kumalo, Johannesburg.
Man's best friend, or so the saying goes. But sadly, hundreds of dogs are being neglected because their owners just can't afford them anymore. At this facility, dogs and cats are brought in almost daily.
It's unfortunately a sad reality. I think a lot of households are feeling the economic pinch. There's a lot of people bringing their animals in, saying they can no longer afford to keep them.
It costs on average about 270 rand a month to feed a dog. Abraham says there's been an increase in abandoned pets after the owners have fled a house or flat while still owing rent. But one dog owner says despite being unemployed, his dogs come first. Brendan Jafters is bringing in his beloved Roxy and Bruno for their vaccinations.
I'd rather go sleep hungry and not to give my dogs food. I'll share my plate of food with him.
While it's sad to see these animals in cages, they are the lucky ones. This centre can accommodate between 300 and 500 animals. Here they are cared for, fed, and volunteers take them for walks. The SPCA doesn't get a cent from government and relies completely on donations. Aisha Ismail, Cape Town.
South Africa's finance minister is a man. The Reserve Bank governor is a man. Most of the country's top CEOs are men. But if you want to know what's really happening in the economy, ask a woman. That's right. Some of the biggest clues are actually in her cosmetics bag. It's called the Lipstick Index. And the research goes all the way back to the Great Depression. Back then, the US economy shrunk nearly 30% in just 4 years. But the sale of lipstick continued to climb. Analysts claim that the sales of lipstick and nail polish often go up during a recession. The reason? Many women will cut back on luxury items, but they still want something that makes them feel good. The key lesson here, if lipstick is flying off the shelves, the economy could be in trouble. The hemline index may be the most accurate indicator of all. 2 Dutch researchers tracked the length of skirts between 1921 and 2009. The results? Well, when the economy is up, so is the skirt. The stats don't lie. The economy affects the length of your skirt. But there's a twist. The hemline lags almost 3 years behind. So if things get worse, it might take a while to see the evidence. Of course, men have a few indicators of their own. This is the haircut index. Research suggests men have fewer cuts during a recession. In fact, some wait 8 weeks before heading to the barber. There's also the underwear index. Economists say that men tend to buy less briefs when times are tough. As you've probably realized, some indicators are more reliable than others. But as the saying goes, desperate times call for desperate measures. Michael Marulia, Johannesburg.
Without following the rules, outgoing Tshwane City manager Moeketsi Mosola awarded a multi-billion rand contract to Clet Africa. The city no longer wants him, but he will not walk away empty-handed. That's because ratepayers will pay for the remainder of his contract. Mayor Stevens Mokhalapa says he had 2 choices when he asked council to endorse the controversial settlement agreement.
Do I go for a long, protracted legal battle, or do I make sure that we remain focused as a city and deliver the services? And I chose the latter of making sure that we deliver services to the people, rather than wasting time on a long, protracted legal case that can go either way.
The city has now decided to nullify a forensic report by Bowman Law Firm which looked into the Clet Africa contract. Mosola previously fought through the courts and succeeded in stopping the report from being made public. After a scathing report by the Auditor General, the mayor has now appointed an internal audit performance committee to determine who must take the blame for the unlawful Clet Africa contract.
Remember, the essence of the APC is to now look at culpability. The Auditor General has declared it irregular, I've cancelled it, and then now it was a question of what do we do moving forward? Do we look at culpability? Who did what at what stage? Because as it stands at this point in time, it is just accusations that are there, but we had to drill it down to say in the line chain of the events of the contract, what happened, to get factual information.
For now, the controversial city manager is smiling all the way to the bank as we wait to see what yet another investigation will uncover. Molo Kumulot, Johannesburg.
Then there's water coming down on both sides of the road and other debris, we won't describe that all now. And the manhole, the actual steel manhole, pops out of the ground.